Well, hey, my name is Zach Snyder, and you're listening to the Blackbar Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Caleb and Nick. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. That's exactly what I wanted. Today's a bit of a special episode as we have a pre-record presentation for you guys. As we brought on two friends of the podcast, one who has been on and one who has not. They are both representing SALT Conference. We have Luke McElroy, who's the SALT co-founder, and JT Bowling, who is the marketing manager for SALT. And I'm pretty sure I just said his last name incorrectly. Oh my gosh. I've been reciting his last name after asking. He said he was going to leave the podcast if I got it wrong, so I guess that's the end of the episode. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I can't wait to see JT totally light you up, because he was saying it correct, but JT kind of set himself up for failure. The last word he said before we started recording was not how you say his last name. So.
No. Don't say Bowling, right?
I said, don't look at the tree, and you hit the tree. So,
man. Well, I didn't intend to be the core of the opening bit, but here we are. For those that are listening, if you have not yet checked out SALT's podcast, which is called the Monochrome Podcast, be sure to listen to that. We've got kind of a crossover today, and you'll also be able to hear this episode over on their feed. If for some reason you want to listen to them both twice, it's the same content,
sure.
But excited for how their team contributes and intros kind of the content we're discussing today. Also, I wore my SALT swag. I don't know if any of my other co-hosts wore my SALT swag or not.
I was thinking about it. I was going to do the old this is my church media t-shirt. But I went for a run today, and I wore that for that, so it was too sweaty. I figured that would be the right thing. But yeah.
And also for those that keep hearing me talk about SALT and wondering what in the world is SALT. SALT is a Christian conference, and let me pass it over to Luke, because he probably has it better prepared than I do. And after my initial mess up, I'm going to send it over to our guest, SALT. SALT, can you tell me what Luke's about?
It's actually pronounced
so
SALT.
Funny. SALT. Yeah. So SALT is really a community that is designed to kind of come alongside creatives and technicians in the local church. And what we want to do is we want to try and help challenge the church to greatness. We do that mostly through a conference, right now, at least. In 3 days in the fall, we're going to be heading to Dallas, Texas this year. So if you're anywhere close to the middle of the United States, come on. First time in Dallas for a while, but 3-day event, workshops, main room, inspiring lobby atmospheres, sponsors, and a whole lot of community is really kind of the heartbeat. But we just want to come alongside churches, help them.
Yeah. We've always resonated with that idea too. And Caleb, what you were going to say.
For sure. And very thoroughly successfully in that, as I think all three of us have been recipients of that ministry. And I think one of the things we want to talk about today about how Blackbar in some capacity is sort of an outpouring of that ministry that we received in some of those first years that were there. So definitely highly recommend SALT. I'll be there again this year. I think it's like my third or fourth year in a row going. So
that's about right.
Hopefully to see you guys there as well.
Yeah.
Well, we're big fans of the Blackbar podcast, and not only Blackbar podcast, but the three of you, because there is so much inner workings between our two communities. And as Caleb and I were talking kind of earlier, as this idea was manifesting of, hey, what if we did something together for a final episode for the SALT podcast this year? We said, hey, let's do it with Blackbar because of some of y'all's origin story. But I'm going to just tease this real quick. Blackbar actually helped us design the entire Monochrome podcast branding and has helped with merch over the years and helped with all sorts of graphics last year. So as I'm repping the SALT hat designed by yours truly over here. So
yeah, it's always a fun project when you yourself are the target demographic. Like I am a church media person, so I get to make this up. I think it's cool. It's always fun. Always fun.
We like hiring people that we say design for you, don't design for someone else.
Right. Yeah.
Rarely as designers do you get to have that commission on your life.
Absolutely.
So in today's episode, we're going to kind of mix things up a little bit, and you'll probably hear us talk a little bit about the origin of Blackbar and how it supports SALT. But before I get into that, because we're almost kind of switching hosting at that point, we're going to have the guys interview us briefly. I do want to hear for both Luke and JT, what was kind of your media origins? What maybe not the whole story, but you started not in media at some point in your life, whether that was a child or later on. and then you now are in this position where you're supporting the SALT team. Could you guys give us a little insight onto yourselves first?
Yeah, so I was actually born during a podcast, and
nice.
Wow.
We have already gone to the R-rated.
Oh my.
So you can go. That'll be linked below if you want to go.
Oh
Right,
boy,
right.
stop.
No, but I honestly, I've kind of been in the worship world my whole life, and anyone who's been on smaller worship teams or ministry knows you kind of wear a lot of hats. And so in being a worship leader, I also was the sound guy and the in-ears guy and the rigging and running all the lines guy and the recruiting guy and the volunteer encouragement guy. And so, and then I also worked for a school and ran their conferences for a time and kind of really helped them max those out every year. And so that's kind of how I got into this, and then became a part of SALT about a year and a half ago, and just loved Luke's vision and heart and way of articulating that and how that's lived out through SALT. I hadn't heard of it before. And so that's kind of how I got here. And then I've been the marketing manager for a year and a half, and been a part of starting our podcast and all of that stuff. So it's been awesome. It's been a great world to step into, and I'm super thankful and excited to be here. So
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
It's good to hire a marketing manager when they've never heard of you, because then we can say, great, find more of you.
yeah.
Man, I grew up not on a podcast, but I was born with ADHD. And as anybody in church technology knows, when you're a kid in church with ADHD, the best way to get you to focus is to put you in the back of the room and the soundboard or the lighting board for my sake, and figure out how to have a bunch of buttons in front of you. And it was the greatest thing. And I say this all the time, but there is something beautiful about engaging youth in the realm of technology in church, because it actually gave me this weird sort of way to connect with the message, connect with what God was doing in my own life. And in serving, I actually found my calling, because I couldn't just sit in a pew and pay attention, but I could sit behind a lighting console and pay attention. So lights were kind of the beginning, eventually moved into video, and I've never been audio, so don't ask me.
I'm with you there.
I can definitely attest to the fact that as much pain as ADHD has caused me in my life, being an extremely late diagnosis, it absolutely is a superpower for learning all things technology and everything. I wouldn't have it any other way.
So I think I discovered SALT first. I went with my church team back in 2017, 2016. I don't even remember. And then I told these guys about it, who we stayed connected after college. And then at one point we finally got them to go with our other buddy, Matt Oliphant, and who we went to college with. And I think that was kind of the year, and I'm going to toss this one over to Caleb. I think that was kind of the year where we were chewing on a lot. Caleb especially was chewing on a lot. So
the very, very beginning as a Blackbar was conversations that happened in college. Nick and Zach and I, Zach and I especially, were a part of a ministry at the time that was sort of this arts ministry that was about getting people who played music of all different genres and made all different arts of different kinds, that was intended to be sort of like worshipful and do events and stuff like that. And we were part of that using other talents. And then at one point we brought it to the ministry director, like, hey, we also have these talents in digital media, whether that be graphic design, video production, whatever. Is that something we can incorporate into the ministry? And what we heard back, pretty much word for word, was those gifts are for promoting ministry, not for performing ministry. And we knew in our heart of hearts that is absolutely not true. We know that's not right. We need to figure out, what does a media ministry look like? And a decade of thinking and planning and trying to figure things out, Blackbar, the very seedlings of it, started to come together. But the thing that we really didn't know how to do circa that, I think 2019 SALT, was financially how to make it even reasonably possible. One thing we never wanted to do was charge for the content. We wanted to make it available and free for anybody to listen to it. That's very important to the mission of Blackbar. Yep. And I personally was extremely stuck, because it's a lot of work making the content, and we all know how much time that is. But I was stuck, and I had a bad attitude. and I was frustrated. And Zach talking about this SALT conference thing. And the last thing I wanted was a bunch of other people who were already successfully doing the thing I wanted to do, telling me about how good they are at it. And I didn't think I was going to learn anything. I being totally honest, I had a terrible attitude about it. And then I went and that
was Caleb's unhealthy Enneagram 3. That's all.
Yeah, it absolutely
He just didn't want anyone else to
was.
tell him what his thing is. Yeah.
It went, and I sat in the first workshop that I was in, which I believe was with Phil Bowdle. And he kicked my butt into the wall with everything that he taught me, and just smacked it out of me like, really, there are people that know way more than I do. There's so much more to learn in the world of church media and everything. And it managed to kick my attitude enough to actually choose to participate in the community groups, which is not something I was going to do. I was not going to sit around with a bunch of strangers I didn't know and talk about the issues that I have in my job or whatever. But I'm so glad that I did. And I think the community group that I was a part of is like, I feel like it's an all-star community group of some of the people that ended up meeting there. John Mark, who's now working with you guys in Orange and with SALT and everything, and also as a volunteer on our team on Blackbar. And I remember at that community group, just like pouring my heart out, getting emotional, crying, which, if you know me, is not something that I do on a regular basis, of just explaining, this is what I want to do. I want to serve people in ministry and media ministry, like recognizing the burnout that happens on a regular basis, how we can prevent it, how we can raise the level of excellence in church media across the board, and not knowing how to make that a viable business, not knowing how to turn that into a ministry that can sustain itself. And nobody there at the table had any answers. But as soon as I finished vomiting all of that stuff, I turned around and Gary Molander, who was running the whole event, was just standing over my shoulder and just listening to the whole thing, basically. And I looked at him, saw him, and he went, and then he walked away. And that was basically it.
And I had remembered the year before, I went to a community group before without these guys with my teams, and we had the same experience. We didn't want to, not that everyone here is an introvert, but a lot of our folks are introverts. You don't want to get connected to other people at other places, but we did it. And I remember that year, Gary Molander also was leading the segment that I was a part of. Right. And I left, and I was just I was not devastated, devastated in a good way, I guess. I was just the thing he shared was just a whole new breadth of experience in terms of media. So whenever Caleb was here and he was telling me about the community groups, it's I got to take you to Gary. It's not hard. I'll be the introvert. I'll introduce you to Gary. And then I took Caleb over to talk to him.
Yeah. And he, in so many words, basically said, you just got to start doing it, and God will provide a way to make it work. God will provide ways to make it sustainable. You just got to serve, do what you know you're supposed to do, and the rest will take care of itself. And in 2 months, we were posting videos and actually got started. And
I want to jump in real quick because I just want to say, first off, I love this story. And every time I hear it, every time you tell me this story, Caleb, I'm reminded that you were not alone. You were not the first person that came to SALT thinking that you had it all together and couldn't learn anything. Right. And probably was begrudgingly going, well, the church paid for it. I need to honor them and show up, and not just go to Dallas.
I'm not just going to go to Dallas, Nashville.
Right.
And you're not going to be the last. And what I love about what God does through SALT every single year is stories like that, and it is not because we know a whole bunch of experts. I think Phil Bowdle would say the same thing, that he has sat in classrooms and gone, wow, I have so much to learn, because there's something beautiful. And I think this is what's so neat about what you guys are doing at Blackbar, but there's something beautiful about the church helping the church be the church. Yeah. And there's a lot of places online. There's a lot of YouTube videos. There's a lot of places where you can sort of learn a skill or a talent from quote unquote an expert outside the church. But when we get a chance to get into community and we get a chance to learn collectively, we grow collectively. And as iron sharpens iron, I think that it helps us also kind of bounce and sort of circle up with people like Zach and Nick that we're sitting at a table with, and John Mark, and I know Katie was on that. So I want you to really quickly, I know we've taken a lot of time for this story, but I want you to share quickly. We did a story on something that came out of this that had nothing to do with Blackbar, because I know Blackbar essentially came out of this, this community group and all this. Maybe give just a synopsis of kind of what was happening on the other side with Katie.
I don't personally know. I haven't spoken with Katie in quite a long while, so you might know more of this story than I do.
Does Zach or Nick, do you guys know what went down right after?
They weren't at that table.
No.
We were in different tables.
We were different tables.
I've been trying to like see how to navigate this, but I actually wasn't at that salt.
No,
see, Caleb and I work at the same church, and there was only enough money in the budget for one person to go.
So they said the boss.
So Nick's over here going, I would have gone.
Yeah.
I tried to get him there.
Caleb tried real hard, and I begged, but
the whole story is
in the cards.
So what did happen with Katie then?
Yeah.
So
Bring
Katie
us
was
into this
one of
larger
y'all's
circle.
community group members. And what I remember hearing from John Mark, who is serving on our Orange Thread team and helps us all, like you mentioned, I think he may have been the first to tell us a story. We ended up doing a whole video. So if you want to go to YouTube, you can go look at her video. But essentially, 2019 was right at the precipice of COVID, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Right.
that was in October, and it was April or March that you guys were having to kind of figure out how to stream. And I remember Katie telling us this story on video that she was not really the tech director or even creative director. She was like a children's pastor, if I'm not mistaken, and just kind of volunteering and creative. And her pastor came to her and said, hey, you went to that SALT conference. We need a stream in like 7 days. And she texted your whole community group from SALT. And basically was like, help, exclamation point. How do I stream?
Right.
And from what I know, like all of you guys got on a Zoom call or something pretty quick. And was like, okay, here's some just key sort of building blocks. I think John Mark may have actually shown up at her church and like helped her get on Facebook that first week. But like within 7 days, she was online. And she attests that, like, I wish she said on video that, like, it was because of the genius that the SALT team connected us. No, she just said, it's because of the connections that sort of got allowed to happen. And that's incredible. Now, that kind of relates to a little bit of, like, what made Blackbar kind of blow up. Who wants to take that from here?
Yeah, I think I'll take that, and then I want to pass it to Nick because he's been really essential to kind of our online community. So we launched in 2020, 3 months before COVID hit. We were doing a podcast and a YouTube video every single week. That first year was, just sunflowers and rainbows, like because we did that first.
I'm sorry.
Year.
Did you say first year or first 3 months? I was confused.
3 months. We actually did it for that first year, but we slowly learned over time that as we were producing and creating free content every single week, it was taking a lot from us, and we had to find something that was more sustainable. But in the meantime, we were able to develop a YouTube channel. One of our videos went, in the age of virality, like what is virality anymore? But like semi-viral. We were producing high amounts of content, and then we also wanted to take it to a next step. So we created a Discord community, which we've been big proponents of Discord for a long while. And I think, it's 2024 as of the time of this recording. That first year, we put out a lot of content, emotional energy, and investment into our community. And Nick, you want to just talk briefly about what our Discord community became over the course of the past couple of years?
Absolutely. So right when we started making YouTube content, one of the things that we knew we had to do is not just, we didn't just need to put content online. We also wanted to build a community around that content as well. And Zach, Caleb, and I have been playing video games for as long as I can remember, specifically Destiny 2. And so that required us all to be able to get on a video call to be able to play. And so naturally we found Discord. And so we became pretty well versed in Discord. And so naturally for us, we created the community via Discord. But Discord basically in those first couple of months and probably for the first couple of years really was kind of like an immediate help desk for a lot of people. We had individuals come alongside, specifically, we've already mentioned John Mark, but a couple other people as well that joined us that became what we call certified pros. And so people that we know what they're talking about. And so someone would join our community and they join having a question about something, and immediately we were able to have a couple people come by and answer their questions, walk them through different things. And as that's been going on, we've the three of us have really started making a new kind of focus, trying to not just have it as a help desk, but really build it as a community. We have things that we call Fourth Fridays. name pending. That's what we have for now. But essentially, it's either a time where we just have everyone come together and either do some sort of game or a fun night together in our community, or something that's happening next month will be a time of teaching where someone's going to be leading that time and helping specifically in a certain area of church media marketing. I believe the next one actually might just be John Mark teaching a little bit about video systems, if I remember.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think our favorite part about the Discord is like it was very much created to be a functional help desk system, especially right at the start of COVID. The video that went viral was how to get in a live stream up this Sunday for basically nothing, and we recorded it and edited it overnight so we could put it out as soon as possible. Right.
And believe it or not, none of us, the three of us, technical live stream is not our proficiency.
No, that's not but we needed to have
fake it till you make it,
right? And the Discord served to that, but then all of a sudden people stuck around after that first question because they realized that there were other people here that were also dealing with the same kind of last minute late requests from their pastors at 11 p.m. on Saturdays, right? And they were also trying to figure out how to get their sermon slides to stand out, and just the community that ended up building around itself. We have learned and grown so much from it, and we have taken back so much, but so many people have been touched due to that community. And I think that it is sort of the best thing that came out of what Blackbar has become, and couldn't be more thankful for that.
Yeah.
Well, what I love about this conversation is the exact title of what we've kind of titled this whole episode of building online communities, not just audiences. Right. And I think in the world of content and the world of social media, everybody's obsessed with how many followers and how many views have you watched or whatever. And I think churches get caught up in this conversation too. At least I can speak to churches that we've spoken with in the SALT community where they feel that pressure from their pastor, their executive team of just get views or get more followers or how many people watched, right? I'll never forget Andy Stanley always used to say, like, the questions that you ask as a leader in meetings and in conversations are going to drive the vision that your organization is going to have. And so if there's a leader listening to this, I may ask you, what questions are you asking your team? Are you asking, hey, how many views did we get last week? Or how many followers are we at right now? Versus, maybe the question of like, well, what great question was asked this week? Or Andy Stanley started coming into staff meetings, and instead of saying how many people showed up on Sunday, he used to say, what transformation stories did we hear from this weekend? Did we hear anybody's life that was transformed?
Right.
And the reason I bring a lot of this up is what I think you guys unlocked was that what we all as humans want more than any is connection. And those of us who serve in creative and technical areas of the church actually want it and yearn it more, because I think the natural tendency of our role and our job is that we don't have connection as a natural byproduct of what we do. I mean, you kind of referenced this earlier here, Caleb, that early on in church, when you guys were working on the fine art stuff, there was this group that said like, oh, no, video and storytelling and all that. That's just a way to promote ministry. That's not ministry itself. That's not art. That's a propaganda piece to get you to come to church. And so I think there's obvious connections there, but it was actually Gary Molander who told me in one of the early conversations about SALT that we were sort of saying, hey, this is what God's put on our heart. What are we missing? It's funny how Gary was involved in both of our sort of origin stories. Yeah. He actually said, hey, Luke, as a pastor, I want to share something with you. The church tech guy, which for him was usually a guy, he said his office was usually the furthest from my office, and he was the staff member I interacted with less than any other staff member. So I have the least amount of interaction with him, and he's physically the furthest from me. And he's like, no wonder this community, you feel a burden to help connect, because they are just naturally isolated. So I want to champion, I want to call out the idea that it was that connection. It was that longing to sort of belong somewhere that helped people feel like they could be seen and heard and known, and they have a tribe now. And there's such power in that,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think people would arrive in our Discord asking like, how do I set up a live stream? And as soon as they started hearing other people talk about like, oh man, I can't believe I have to get these slides done, tonight or something like that. It's suddenly that clicked of like they're almost kind of like you mentioned with Caleb at Salt that first year. There are people, you know, that are experiencing the same thing as me, and from that bloomed the community of just conversations that kept happening over and over.
Yeah.
And I think there's a point to be made that social media in general has been kind of going away from the idea of social, right? It's been more and more focused on the content we create and developing an audience. And you're posting on Instagram, not so generally speaking, you could have a giant conversation in the comments with all the different, you know, people in your followers. It's so you can get a bunch of likes, right? Even posting on your story, there's literally no way to have a conversation other than with the person who created the content and sending them a direct message afterwards. And I think Discord does sort of uniquely stand out amongst the different social media platforms as something that is like discoverability on Discord is arguably terrible, maybe the worst out of it. Like if you're trying to build just a giant audience of people, like no one's a Discord influencer, right? If you're trying to build a community of people who are all able to communicate with each other and lift each other up as the church is supposed to do, I feel like if you're going to start an online church in these days and age and like call it an online campus, you better have a way for that online campus and community of people to interact with each other, not just with the church staff or the pastor or anything like that. It's like an integral part to ministry, is the community ministering to itself, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I want to jump in there because I think you're not kidding. Like you've got to be willing and you've got to be brave enough to use that sort of phrase in the church to have unfiltered conversation outlets. If you're going to do an online ministry, or you're going to have online campus or whatever, it can't just be broadcasting. It can't just be watch this. It has to have a space where we can have conversation. You got to have virtual hallways. And I know during COVID, when our team was trying to help, you know, not the Salt team, but the other side of our sort of company, we were trying to help corporations figure out how do you have hallway conversations in a virtual environment? And it was how do you break through that? I want to just say for a second here, JT on our team is crushing this concept because I think before he joined our community or our staff, our community was far more broadcast, social, or media. And I've actually been able to watch him engage on a one-to-one level and sort of really connect on the back end. But, you know, JT and I've even talked about this, that like we've seen a lot of social media has kind of frozen. Like when was the last time you followed someone new? I could tell you of times when Twitter, you know, X, you know, I'd go on there and I'd find hashtags and I'd be like, who's going to Salt Conference? And I'd create offline connections and, hey, we're going to go hang out or connect or whatnot. And that just doesn't happen anymore. And I think there is something beautiful. I don't know if JT, you want to speak to some of the sort of stories that have come out of like the people that you've interacted with and, you know, the messages that you'll very quickly bring somebody into just a DM just to have a conversation that kind of goes from online to offline.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would just say like when we're talking about community and building community, I think this goes for whether you're online or offline. It takes mutual effort and that's tough to curate and to like, you know, so I always say like someone's got to go first. And so it might as well be me. And so that's kind of been my philosophy with social media is like, say the thing, reach out to the person and be the first to like, be like, hey, I'm here. This is kind of, you know, something we're saying or talking about. And maybe you identify with it, maybe you don't, but let's have a conversation. And I think if you come with it from a point of wanting to connect and wanting to help and be there for people like you guys have done with Discord, which I'm also on, which is a great resource and a great community to be a part of. But if you come at it with a heart of like, hey, how can I pour into you? Like that will impact your metrics and your numbers way more than if you focus on your metrics and your numbers. And so thank you for saying that, Luke. That's so kind. I appreciate that. But
I want to double down on the value point that JT just made. He essentially just said, we all long to connect. Someone has to make a first move. Why not be me? I mean, if anything, that should hopefully encourage you as you're listening to this going, who do you need to be reaching out to? You know, I want to tell this real quick story. There's two churches here in Nashville that I'm good friends with both tech directors, and they share a driveway. And that's maybe strange, but that's what happens in Tennessee. There's so many churches, they just share driveways and they're like right next to each other and they don't even know each other. And I remember one of them telling me, oh yeah, I wish we could borrow that church's, talking about the church that's literally next door to them that they share a driveway with. I wish we could borrow their lift to change out our Christmas stuff. And I'm like, here's his phone number. Go text the guy. I'm sure he'd be all for it if they're not using it. And he's like, no, I don't know. Like, he's been a tech director there forever. We've never connected. I'm like, you've never connected because neither of you have texted. There's the phone number. Go take action. And so it's like, who in your town, who in your community, who in your network, whether it's online or offline, do you just need to reach out and go, hey, let's grab coffee. Hey, I saw this thing. And I think encouragement or praising someone for their work or just giving them an attaboy is maybe a really safe first step too, to just be like, hey, love what you guys are doing. How can we put wind underneath your sails,
For sure. I think there's also an angle here when it comes to online connection, everything in the realm of evangelism in general, and like actually legitimately effective evangelism online, which is not something I think most churches have figured out how to do yet. Because a long story short, posting a Bible verse on your feed every day is not really going to do it most of the time. But like I've told this story a handful of times within our Blackbar community, but around 2020, same time Blackbar was getting started up, again, that ADHD that we talked about earlier, I have hyperfixations and hobbies. And for whatever reason, the one at the time was high-powered Nerf guns, where you would buy Nerf guns and then you would modify them to shoot 300 feet per second and put holes in drywall and stuff. That was my thing. I loved it. And I found a community of people online, of other man children, who are also super into doing that sort of thing, that happened to be local to the area that I was in. It happened to be a Discord community. I don't think that's especially special that it was. And I just spent a couple of weeks engaging with these other guys and talking about Nerf gun stuff and, just being a normal person with hobbies similar to them. And then all of a sudden hearing through the grapevine, just conversation going on that they really wanted to have a logo put together for their sort of club that they were developing, and they really needed a venue to actually play around paintball, but Nerf guns basically. And within a day, I'm a graphic designer. I whipped together a logo, and I worked at a church with a recreational facility and managed to rent out the space. And I served them. I solved the two problems they had, and then all of a sudden, these opportunities for conversation, because they realized it was at a church, and they started asking these silly questions like, can I come if I wear ripped jeans? Will that be allowed? Like if I get shot with a Nerf gun and it hurts, am I allowed to curse? Like I've never been baptized. Am I allowed to still come in the building? Yeah. And all of a sudden these micro conversations, opportunities for ministry happened just because I was a person who was a Christian in an online community willing to make connections with people. And I don't think that's a particularly unique or special thing. I think that's the definition of the Great Commission. And if churches figure out how to take that same exact concept of how we meet non-believers and convince them, or introduce them to Jesus, and you just do that also on the internet, we could change the amount of people that are now within our sphere of influence that may not be anywhere near us geographically. It's exponential. And I feel like if churches could figure that out and execute it in a real way, I mean, we could change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a conversation that I think it was 2021 that we went to that church conference. We had a main session discussion about this idea that we've called the digital missionary. And I believe SALT has had conversations that are kind of around this idea of how are you specifically equipped to reach people in an online space that share your same interests, that share your same focuses and goals, and then how are you equipped to help them form a relationship with Christ in a space in which they feel comfortable and safe. And I think Nick talked earlier about how we use Discord for our gaming. It's separate from the Blackbar Discord. And the amount of conversations that we've had in a Discord that I would say maybe generously is half Christian, half active Christian. The amount of conversations we've had about spirituality and theology and the implication of just the philosophy of faith in the modern context, that only happens because we spend the hours playing games, that we build this trust and we build this space in which people can have real conversations where they don't feel judged, they feel like they are respected and listened to. And not let me be clear, like, we're not going into the gaming Discord like, hey, our objective is to evangelize our friends, and if we don't, then that's no. We go in wanting to be friends with them, sharing a like interest, and then from there, the natural result that we just continue to follow through on in relationship is connection. And the natural result of connection from those that have a understanding and thoughts about our beliefs is talking about and discussing those beliefs. And I think there's an opportunity for all of us to engage in that capacity in this digital missionary space, regardless of whether or not you are officially legitimized as a missionary by your denomination. So
I know Jeff Henderson, who came out with the book, for, and kind of that whole movement of what does it look like for us to be for things as a church rather than kind of against. He really helped us understand that, like, especially in politics specifically, like, we're more against the other candidate than we are for something. Right. And he's like, what does it look like for the church to be known for something, not against? Because there's so much things like we're quote unquote against. Yeah. And he said in a church staff meeting, he got their church together and he said, we just wanted to truly meet people where they were, instead of, like you're talking about, like, you just showed up in this environment, you just gamed because you loved people, and then conversation naturally went to spirituality or faith or the gospel. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of like, we can't expect the community to be for us unless they know we're for them. And he was like, every meeting we would start and we'd spend 20 minutes and we would basically just be on social media and we would just encourage and share, local businesses that we had just recently heard of. And so he's like, you get this whole staff team that would basically just like completely bombard some local businesses' social media and just basically lift them up, and just love on them and kind of be in their space. And I think what it means for a church to sort of meet people where they are is not broadcast your message to every end of the earth. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of a little bit like Bullhorn Guy, outside a pop concert or something. That's like, repent, you need Jesus. Right. It's like, okay, well, just because it's being broadcast doesn't mean it's being heard.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But if instead it was, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Hey, can I get to know you? Hey, where are you from? Where did you grow up? What's your perspective in the world or whatnot? And I think too often social media has caused us to sort of be more divided than we are unified around just this idea of, like, we can be kind of online bullies and we can sort of broadcast, we can media our way through a conversation rather than being social. And being social, like JT said, is, hey, who are you?
Right.
How are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're talking, Luke, I'm thinking about, like, it's easy to live in a duality with your online personality and your in-person personality. And a lot of people think of that of, like, you'll go online and you'll, curse a lot or act a different way. And that's a problem. But I think too, like, in the same way, we'll go online and we'll be like, well, I'm going to be a digital evangelist, like Blackbar said. So I'm going to start commenting John 3:16 on everything, or start yelling at people through my comments and stuff. And it's like, you wouldn't do that to someone in your church or on the street or, at your, your Nerf shooting holes. That's not how you would interact with someone. You would build a relationship with them and get to know them and who they are and their family. And then through that relationship, evangelize to them and let them see your life and how you live. And so I think the tendency can go both ways of, like, hey, act online how you act in person with people. If that's healthy, hopefully it is. If it's not, we should go to counseling or something. But yeah, I mean, I think living in a way that's like, hey, get to know people first and build that relationship in that community, and then, you'll see fruit come out of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think practically speaking, it's worth talking about, like, if you are a church or a ministry or even just a Christian content creator, like, what is it? How could you actually pull that off? Discord obviously worked for us, right? Discord, if you put a Venn diagram with the people who were already on Discord and church media tech nerds, it was basically a circle, right? There's certainly people.
What you're saying is launching a Discord Bible study in your church for the women ministry may not be the most effective tool.
maybe
Might not be.
There are other tools. Facebook groups generally tends to be a bit better than us. I believe Clubhouse also is a newer one, but it also has similar systems for good connection. I've seen people even use Slack for things like that, but although there's paid tiers for stuff like that. But being intentional about creating a space not just where you can communicate with your audience, but your audience can communicate with each other. Like you need to set that up ground zero or as soon as you can, and start filling that with your community and encouraging the kinds of conversation that you're hoping to foster in there. And eventually, Nick and Zach can attest, like eventually once the ball gets rolling, it just starts kind of feeding itself. If they start talking to each other, and the amount of podcasts and content ideas that we have now received because people just are asking each other questions and conversations start happening, like.
Can you get in the weeds real quick, Caleb, on like, what did you guys do real early on to sort of spark conversation? Because conversation, like JT's even alluding to, does not naturally happen. Did you guys seed conversation? Did you have weekly questions, daily questions, hourly polls? I mean, what did you guys do to kind of help increase that comfort
to these guys? Because they're definitely far more experts involved in that part of it.
If it's all right, I'll take this one, Zach. So I think early on, a lot of things that helped was just the fact that we had consistent videos happening. During that time, it was a different season for us. Our main jobs were working in a church. And so we used a lot of our evenings to create the content. And so we were creating weekly content. And I think basically creating a question for everyone to discuss on a weekly basis really helped create those conversations early on. Now that we've shifted a little bit to the podcast being bi-weekly, so our content comes out every other week now. It takes a little bit more work to be intentional in creating those moments. So right now on our Discord, one of the best things that has ever happened to Discord, in my opinion, is the fact that now you can create polls, because that's exactly what we'll do. Is we'll generally when we have a topic that's coming up, we like to try to seed some of those ideas into our community and our audience to get them thinking. And for one, that helps them prepare themselves for when the podcast does come out, that they're already primed and thinking about these questions. But also for us as these content creators for the podcast, it also challenges us to understand what things are people actually asking. What are the things that they actually want to know? And so doing these polls, we also do it on Instagram as well, but also the fact that we in our blackout segment, we often will have our guests talk and answer direct questions. And so I think creating that atmosphere where it's not just us talking to them, it's allowing them to be a part of the conversation and own the conversation has been a really good way to build that back and forth communication in the community.
Yeah, and I would even say, go ahead, Caleb.
I'll just say regarding the polls, I think the magic of that is that the barrier entry to enter a conversation is a single click. Rather than
I agree.
Sentence or anything like that. But as soon as what we'll often do, especially when we're generating content for Blackout or question and answer at the end, is we'll start with a poll or something that only requires one click or one tap. And then we'll ask one follow-up question, like based on this previous question, can you explain on this thing? And the amount of people, because they've already committed to the one click, then they want to go through and do the follow-up. And if you're already having that conversation in a place like Discord, where that discourse is public, where people can go back and forth, conversation just naturally sort of comes out of something like that. It's also a helpful technique on Instagram, but specifically on Discord.
Yeah, and I want to make sure to contribute as well. Two thoughts. The first is that like any ministry, like any club, like anything, it's going to have seasons. So like churches have seasons. Your church of 95 years old may have different seasons than your church of 5 years old, and that's normal and natural, especially as we were talking about how we used to create video and podcasts every single week. It was different. We've pulled way back. And alongside of that, in the original first year, I don't think it would be exaggerating to say we've helped over 100 churches that year. But there's a lot of people that came, got the answers, and left. So over the course of the past 4 years, especially Nick and I spent a lot of time with the help of our volunteer certified pros team, that we've had to adjust our expectations to understand that we're in a different season and then shift accordingly. So I think it's really easy for us to just get discouraged when you see like a high, like volunteers is always, I'm sure, one of the biggest questions that you guys get at SALT. How do I raise more volunteers for my community? Right. So with this, we're not only looking for volunteers, we're also looking for people to engage. So being aware and open to the shifting of seasons is important. And then I think the second thing, which you can say this probably across the board, whether or not it's social media or in your own online communities, is like it always comes back to intentionality, right? Are you building time intentionally to invest in the things that you want to see grow? I think sometimes if a media person, I almost feel like there's two phases of a media person. Either you're overloaded doing too much, or you've got nothing going on, so you're just trying to busy your hands. And I think in either of those situations, you have to figure out what your time investment is going to be. Like if you've got 50 things going on and you also want to start a Discord community, maybe reassess when you're back down to 30 things. Or if you don't even know what to start and you're just trying to generate something because you just want to start something and be involved in something, spend that time to put in the investment on the front end to make sure your time investment is worth it and sustainable over a long period of time. Because if you're in this for the long haul, you got to be present for the long haul. Because if you just start dropping off, people are going to disappear, you know?
Yeah.
So good.
As you're talking, I'm thinking like, man, what could a ministry person do, a media person, do to like implement like what you guys have done? Literally just take every time they've said the word podcast and replace it with Sunday morning sermon. Like you've got the Sunday morning sermon coming out every week, like generate questions from that, like generate discussion around that. Like when you build your Discord, have different things about, different service areas or whatever, or different, discussions around that and have polls around that. And that can be your like source material that you pull from, which a lot of people already do for Sunday schools and things like that. But to be able to also engage on a deeper level on a Discord server or on social media or wherever, Facebook group, whatever that looks like, it's not like you have to start from scratch every week.
Yeah. And hey, if you can also, on top of that, build a team around you pursuing the same vision, then it's going to make it better. Because SALT wouldn't happen without a team. Blackbar wouldn't happen without a team. Church wouldn't happen without a community, So do you have anyone that can come alongside of you? Because I think with Caleb, Nick, and I mean, this wouldn't have started without the three of us, and it wouldn't have probably lasted without the three of us through all the seasons that we've been through. There's nothing. That 3 is the perfect number, but I mean, like, you could make a biblical case for that. I mean, I'm just saying.
There's also 7 and 4.
Yeah, there is nothing that is going to be successful in the long term that isn't also going to be sustainable in the long term. It has to be sustainable in order to be successful. So if you're killing yourself to make it happen for a month, like you need to figure out a different way to do it.
Take it from us.
For sure.
That's good.
Cool, guys. Well, I think that's probably where we're going to go ahead and land the conversation today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I know that we kind of swapped hats throughout of the host and the guest. So thank you guys for sharing. Great. We really appreciate it. And then for those that are watching, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to check out SALT Conference. Be sure to check out the Monochrome Podcast. And then we'll see you guys next time.